China records over 1,000 new COVID-19 cases in 1 week, and severe cases on the rise. Many people are eating the emperor's grain, posing the threat of collapsing China's financial system. Xi Jinping sends a new crisis signal. China enters the EV trade war. It's all covered in today's China Truths. China records over 1,000 new COVID-19 cases in 1 week, and severe cases on the rise. According to the official website of the Chinese CDC on April 29, a total of 35,089 local COVID-19 cases with effective genomic sequences were reported nationwide from December 1, 2022, to April 27, 2023. These cases all belonged to the Omicron variant and covered 134 evolutionary branches. In addition, the number of positive COVID-19 nucleic acid tests increased from April 21 to 27, with 6,752 cases on the 27th. The number of severe COVID-19 patients who tested positive in the past week increased as well, with 19 cases on the 27th, including 3 severe cases and 16 cases of severe complications in patients with underlying diseases. Delta variant cases have surged by hundreds. From April 21 to 27, 13 evolutionary branches of the Omicron variant were added, and a total of 927 local mutated strain cases were monitored, among which there were 116 new cases of the Delta Plus variant XBB.1.16 and 43 cases of XBB.1.16.1. In the previous week, there were 42 cases of XBB.1.16 and 5 cases of XBB.1.16.1. It's important to note that official pandemic data from China is for reference only, and its accuracy is widely questioned by outsiders. In recent times, there has been a surge in COVID-19 reinfections in the general public. Several social media users have posted their positive antigen test outcomes, and certain medical institutions have verified the existence of such double positives. Furthermore, NTD-TV reported that during the Chinese national holiday, there has been a substantial increase in the number of tourists visiting different scenic spots throughout the country. According to Reuters, on April 29, China witnessed a record-breaking 19 million railway passengers, the highest number in a single day in its history. Additionally, the Civil Aviation Administration of China is forecasting that the air travel volume during the May Day holiday is expected to reach 9 million passengers. Video circulating online shows that the Shanghai Bund has turned into a sea of people, and Nanjing Road pedestrian street is also crowded with visitors. The authorities have even deployed a zipper-like human wall of armed police to maintain order. In Chongqing, the Hongyudong is also packed with people at night, with one witness saying that it is crowded everywhere. What surprised netizens the most is that even the Khumbu Glacier on Mount Everest at an altitude of 5,500 meters was congested in the early hours of May Day. The massive gatherings of people have raised concerns about the possibility of another widespread outbreak of COVID-19, which is causing worries among the public. The witness claimed that a new outbreak of the pandemic is expected in mainland China in May. Dr. Tang, director of the cardiology department at Yixing Chinese Medicine Hospital, said, "At present, most of the infected population are those who were not infected during the first wave of the pandemic and belong to the patients in the early stage of infection. However, the level of antibodies in the body is gradually declining, and everyone's immunity is different. Moreover, the new mutated strain XBB has super strong transmission and immune escape capabilities, which may lead to the phenomenon of reinfection. Especially during holidays, the large-scale migration of people has added momentum to the second wave of infections." Recently, the World Health Organization's leader, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, warned that the latest variant of the coronavirus, XBB.1.16, is still spreading, the virus is still undergoing changes, and it can still cause new waves of diseases and deadly risks. Many people are eating the emperor's grain, posing the threat of collapsing China's financial system. In recent years, China's economy has been continuously declining, and the number of unemployed people has dramatically increased, but the number of eating the emperor's grain has continued to climb. On April 25, Radio Free Asia, RFA, reported that according to the latest data from the Chinese National Bureau of Statistics, the total number of employed people in urban units in China has been decreasing from about 180 million people in 2013 to 170 million people year by year. However, the number of public sector employees, including education, public management, social security, and social organizations, has increased from about 33 million to about 40 million, and the proportion of the employed population has increased from about 18% in 2013 to 23%. In China, financially supported personnel are divided into 4 categories: civil servants, institutional employees, non-institutional employees, and grassroots workers. As the Chinese government's data is always falsified, it is challenging to obtain accurate data on the number of people eating the emperor's grain. According to RFA, in mid-2016, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, issued internal instructions prohibiting the use of terms like people eating the emperor's grain and people supported by state and local finances in public articles and news reports. However, shocking data on emperor's grain eaters has been revealed by high-level CCP officials and local officials. Mr. Song, a citizen of Beijing, said, "Since the founding of the country, its organization has become more and more bloated and enormous. Now it has reached an astonishing level. As far as I know, there has never been such a bloated, overcrowded, and officially dominated parasite in the more than 3,000 years of Chinese history, which sucks the blood of the people. Taking the money of ordinary people to feed this huge institution. This is like robbery." According to reports from Mainland Interface News, in 2015, former Chinese Premier Li Keqiang requested a pay raise for 40 million government and public institution workers during a work phone conference. Furthermore, according to a report from Economic Reference News, statistics from China's Ministry of Finance in 2012 showed that, as of the end of 2009, the number of people supported by local finances alone, including personnel from civil servant positions in public institutions, was 53.926 million. In addition, the total number of quasi-financially supported personnel in China exceeds 10 million. According to Chen Jian, Vice Chairman of the China Economic System Reform Research Association and Chairman of the Beijing Reform and Development Research Association, as of the end of 2014, the actual number of people supported by the CCP's finances far exceeded 64 million. Recently, the Mainland Observer website revealed that in 2022, the number of Chinese civil servants was 7.1 million, with 13 million for party organizations, trade unions, and women's federations, 31 million for institutions, and the number of people supported by the government's finances exceeded 80 million including retirees. The cost of support accounts for 40% of the country's fiscal revenue. So the question is whether the large number of emperor's grain eaters is likely to collapse China's finances. According to Goldman Sachs estimates, including off-budget debt, the Chinese government's debt has soared tenfold over the past decade. Goldman Sachs economists said in a report that, including government borrowing, local government financing platforms, and debt held by policy banks, the Chinese government's debt increased to 156 trillion yuan, $24.5 trillion, last year, equivalent to 126% of GDP. He also estimates that interest payments on the expanded government debt will reach 5.8 trillion yuan, $910 billion, this year, equivalent to 4.8% of GDP, compared to 0.7 trillion yuan, $109 billion, in 2009, or 2.1% of GDP. Currently, most of China's 31 provincial-level administrative units have exceeded the risk warning red line set by the Ministry of Finance. According to a report by Reuters, China's local government debt has reached a massive 66 trillion yuan and continues to rise. Meanwhile, the Chinese government's financial situation is tight because private enterprises, including all market entities, are going bankrupt and they do not have enough money to pay taxes. Therefore, it is hard to imagine that the CCP would have sufficient funds to allocate so much money from its financial resources to feed tens of millions of people. So, what is the reason behind the CCP's need for such a cumbersome system? Beijing citizen Mr. Song said, "It needs such a huge organization to control and monitor the people in the country because the whole society is a powder keg that can explode at any time. Many of its personnel are not directly in the Stability Maintenance Office or in the Public Security and Judicial Departments, but in other agencies, which implies that they are there to maintain stability." Commentator Wang Yi said, "What is the core issue? The CCP is a rogue regime without legitimacy. So how does it rule? It needs to cultivate a group of rogues to help it get things done. The CCP has two hands, one is anti-corruption, and if you are not honest, it will kill you or hit you. At the same time, it lets you make money and gives you some benefits, so that you can sell your life to it." According to Professor Xia Tian from the University of South Carolina Aiken School of Business in the United States, it appears that all three pillars of the Chinese economy have come to a halt. This includes the implementation of the zero-COVID policy, the lockdown policy, and the aftermath of the zero-COVID policy. Furthermore, there has been a shift in the industrial chain, with many joint ventures and foreign-funded enterprises leaving China, resulting in a sharp increase in the country's unemployed population. The economic situation is very severe, and we can also see some clues from the fiscal deficits of various levels of the Chinese government. Yang Xiaoxing, a professor at Guizhou University who was dismissed by the school for speaking out, said that the CCP uses tax and state-owned enterprise profits to support full-time party workers and some non-party social group workers, resulting in about 20 trillion yuan in losses to society. If the situation does not change, society will eventually collapse. Xi Jinping sends a new crisis signal. On May 1, the official magazine of the CCP, Qiushi, published Xi Jinping's speech from the Theme Education Conference, which focused on studying and implementing Xi Jinping's new era of socialism with Chinese characteristics. In the article, Xi Jinping placed initial emphasis on the profound understanding of the significance of launching this theme education, and called for the entire CCP to unify its thinking, will, and actions, among other things. The theme education movement is focused on studying Xi Jinping thought in its entirety, which was introduced by Xi Jinping himself after the leadership reshuffle at the two sessions in March. On March 30, Xi Jinping announced that the entire party would carry out theme education on Xi Jinping thought in two batches from top to bottom, with Kai Chi, a member of the CPC Central Committee's Political Bureau and director of the Central Office for Ideology, is the working group leader for the theme education. So far, it has been more than a month since the Xi Jinping thought study movement began. Xi Jinping has once again demanded that the entire party achieve the three unifications during this study movement. Regarding this, Wang Yi, a columnist for the Epoch Times, believes that Xi Jinping's power has reached its peak, but he has a very strong sense of crisis. So this absurd situation has emerged, that Xi Jinping published an article requiring the entire party to study as Xi Jinping thought. Wang said that self-study reveals what problem? First, the disintegration of the CCP is irreversible, and the entire party is in disunity. Secondly, Xi Jinping has broken the convention by serving a third term, but after his third term, what achievements will he bring to China? Both inside and outside the party have high doubts about him. In this situation, what should he do? He should seize power through so-called unified thinking, unified will, and unified action, to carry out what's called party rectification and theme education. However, he said that it will ultimately become a useless effort, as the party's heart is opposed to him. Kai Shunkuan, an independent commentator and columnist, previously told the Epoch Times that the CCP's movement of the three unifications means that there is still no consistent understanding of Xi Jinping's thought within the party, or there are serious conflicts. Kai said, whether it is the three unifications or the requirement to be loyal and honest to the party, the effect of the compulsory brainwashing throughout the party is not significant, especially since several generations of people who have experienced the reform and opening up generally hate this inhumane political movement, and opposition is inevitable. This kind of political movement will inevitably give birth to more officials who say false, empty words and hypocrisy, because only by being obedient can they survive in the officialdom. China enters the EV trade war. China is boosting its economy with new subsidies that promote auto exports at the expense of jobs and industrial strength in the United States, the European Union, Japan, South Korea, India, and other allied countries. According to Reuters, Beijing announced the subsidies on April 25 in the context of reports of strong EV orders in March for China's outbound shipments. The CCP's economic planners sense massive profits from the global green trend and are trying to push the industry even further to accelerate China's economy. The Chinese government will also force Chinese banks to offer financial support to car manufacturers to expand foreign sales. Beijing has so much control over the Chinese economy that many of its subsidies and tariffs are unofficial. Companies must support other Chinese companies, or they risk punishment. On April 25, China's State Council asked its embassies, consulates, provincial governments, and financial institutions to increase support for exports and encourage the settling of trade in yuan rather than dollars. By 2030, 1 in 3 new vehicle sales will be electric. China dominates that market, with 60% of worldwide electric vehicle (EV) sales, and China's new subsidies add to an international trade war over EV sales. According to the author of this article, Anders Corr, in 2022, the U.S. Democrats devoted $1.2 trillion through the Inflation Reduction Act to divert $3 trillion into the U.S. green economy, which raises energy prices and inflation in the U.S. and irritates its European and British allies, who do not want the subsidies to price them out of U.S. markets. The U.S. subsidies for boosting the economy and reducing global emissions have 2 primary objectives, which won't be cheap to achieve. Ultimately, these subsidies are funded by increased taxes or inflation, both of which harm the U.S. economic growth and, consequently, geopolitical competitiveness against China and Russia. The subsidies will also support vehicle manufacturers in China, as the law has no U.S. sourcing requirements for commercial vehicles, and loopholes exist for passenger vehicle subsidies. U.S. taxpayers pay 100% of the subsidies. Still, they could get as little as 0% of the benefit from new industry and jobs if, for example, a Chinese company built a vehicle in Mexico and exported it to the United States. Beijing could tax that company and use it to buy missiles that target Washington, New York, Tokyo, New Delhi, and Taipei. The subsidies do a bad job of addressing climate change, as China produces twice as much carbon dioxide as the United States, and China's green subsidies are unquantified. According to Corr, at a time when Russia and China are destabilizing global politics, and the United States is already spending an unfair amount of U.S. taxpayer dollars for the provision of global security, it makes little sense to subsidize manufacturing in countries such as Canada and South Korea that don't even contribute the minimum expected defense expenditure of 2% of GDP. These countries are freeriding not only on U.S. defense but also on U.S. green subsidies. It makes even less sense to subsidize cars with components from China, Mexico, and Russia, which are imposing massive costs from the fentanyl crisis, war against Ukraine, and aggression toward Taiwan. Corr concluded that the Democrats are wasting taxpayer dollars as U.S. economic and military power deteriorates relative to those of China. Don't forget to comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths.